The snake steals your last chance at eternal life while you sleep beside the pond. When you wake, your hands close on nothing. The plant you dragged from the bottom of the world is gone. The water is still trembling in little rings near the bank. Something moved through it only moments ago. Something silent, something ancient. You rise too fast, breath tearing in your chest, and see the trail in the mud, the long, soft mark where the body slid away. Then you see the shed skin, pale and empty, left like a joke under the sun. For a moment, you do not understand what you are looking at. Your mind refuses it. Your fingers claw through wet reeds, pebbles, black mud, as if eternity might still be lying there hidden in the roots. But it is gone. Gone into the water. Gone into the scales of a creature that needed only one bite to take what you crossed the edge of the world to find. You are Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, builder of walls, breaker of monsters, 2/3 divine and yet not divine enough. You split Cedar Forest where men were forbidden to tread. You killed the guardian who breathed terror. You brought down the bull of heaven when the sky itself was turned against you. You passed through darkness so deep that time seemed to stop inside it. You crossed waters no living man should touch. You went farther than courage, farther than grief, farther than any king had the right to go. And in the end, all it took was sleep. That is why this story still hurts after thousands of years. Not because Gilgamesh failed. Heroes fail all the time. Not because death won. Death always wins. It hurts because he came so close. Close enough to touch the answer. Close enough to carry it in his own hands. Close enough to believe for one fragile hour that the oldest law in the world might bend for him. It did not bend. The snake slipped away with the plant, and Gilgamesh stood on the shore with nothing but his own breathing, the heat on his skin, and the terrible knowledge that even after all this, he would still die. This is not the oldest story of glory. It is the oldest story of almost reaching what no one was meant to reach, almost tearing open the wall built around every human life, almost coming back from the edge with a secret strong enough to save you from the grave. And perhaps that is why it feels less like myth and more like memory. As if someone very early in the life of our species already understood the cruelest thing of all. The worst losses are not the ones that happen far away. They are the ones that happen with victory already in your hands. Long before empires rose and fell into dust, before philosophers argued, before prophets thundered, before kings wrote their names into stone hoping stone would remember them, there was Uruk, a city of baked brick and hot wind, a city of gates, courtyards, shrines, workshops, fields, canals, threshing floors, temple smoke and noise, men hauling timber, women grinding grain, priests washing statues with perfumed water, children barefoot in the dust, donkeys snorting under loads of clay. The air smelled of earth after irrigation, of dung fires, of bitumen, sweat, bread, river reeds, and sacrifice. And around it all, rising with a kind of defiance, stood the walls. They were not just walls, they were a statement. We are here. We endure. We have measured the land, fired the bricks, hauled the weight, stacked order against chaos. Beyond the walls lay the steppe, the marsh, the open uncertainty where animals ran and storms came without warning. Inside the walls was the human answer to fear, plan, labor, memory, law, name. And at the center of that answer stood Gilgamesh. He was young, strong, restless, and too large for the lives around him. Every story about him begins with greatness. But greatness is a dangerous thing when it arrives before mercy. He was a king made like a weapon. People looked at him and saw beauty, force, impossible stamina, the favor of blood that ran partly from a goddess. They also saw trouble. A man built to exceed limits rarely stops where others beg him to stop. At night, the people of Uruk heard the drums of the palace and felt dread before they knew why. The king did not move through the city like a shepherd among his flock. He moved through it like fire through dry grass. He took what he wanted because wanting, for him, already felt like permission. He worked men hard, tested them, exhausted them, bent custom to his appetite. In some tellings, he reaches first for the brides of the city, as if even marriage itself must kneel before his rank. In others, the complaint is broader, heavier, harder to name, that his strength had become a burden, his energy a tyranny, his greatness something ordinary people were forced to endure. This is important because Gilgamesh does not begin as a wise seeker. He does not begin as the wounded man by the pond. He begins as the kind of ruler who has never truly imagined that the world can deny him anything. And a person like that does not seek immortality in the beginning. He already behaves as if consequence belongs to other people. So the people cry out. They lift their prayers toward the gods, not for treasure, not for rain, not for conquest, but for relief. Make him less alone, they beg. Make something that can stand against him. Give him an equal, a restraint, a mirror. Somewhere above the smoke of offerings and the murmur of temple words, the request is heard. And in the wild place beyond the city, where human roads dissolve into animal paths, Enkidu is formed. He does not come into the world as a prince, not wrapped in linen, not under carved beams, not to the sound of musicians or servants. He comes raw, hair thick over his body, muscles made for running, a face turned more often toward beasts than toward men. He eats grass with gazelles, drinks at the watering hole, startles hunters, tears up traps, frees what has been caught. He belongs to the steppe the way storm wind belongs to the open plain. He is not civilized, he is not obedient, but he is powerful, and power recognizes power even before they meet. Hunters begin returning to Uruk with fear in their voices. Something in the wild is undoing their work. Something human and not human. Something that moves like an animal but thinks enough to hate the trap. They speak of him cautiously, as if naming him too loudly might call him close. Their fathers mutter. Priests listen. Word reaches Gilgamesh. And Gilgamesh, hearing of a being in the wilderness who does not bow, does not feel caution first. He feels interest. That too matters, because what draws him is not morality, not yet, not repentance. It is challenge. The air changes when a person who has never met an equal hears that one may exist. But Enkidu cannot simply be dragged into the city in chains. He has to be turned, drawn across a threshold, detached from the old rhythm of the animals, and brought into the strange heat of human life. So, a woman is sent to him, clever and calm, carrying the oldest civilizing weapon there is, attraction, tenderness, seduction, the call away from instinct into memory, story, bread, bed, speech, shame, desire, time. At the watering place, she waits. The animals come first, heads lowered, ears twitching. Then he comes with them, broad and alert, body tense, with the certainty of one who has never had to fear men because he is not yet one of them. He sees her, stops, watches. The world holds its breath. What happens next is told in many tones, some sacred, some practical, some blunt, some uneasy, but the result is the same. Enkidu crosses a line he cannot uncross. The beasts no longer accept him. The old harmony breaks. When he returns to them, they shy away. Their legs flash in the grass. Their bodies vanish from him. He has gained something and lost something in the same motion, though he does not yet have words for either. That is how civilization first takes hold in this story, not as a clean triumph, as separation, as hunger, as a doorway that closes behind you. He has brought food, bread, beer, things made, not found. He learns to eat what humans make with hands and fire. He learns to drink until warmth spreads through him in a different way than running ever did. He is washed, oiled, clothed, spoken to. The rough edges of the steppe do not disappear, but they begin to translate. The wild man starts becoming legible to the city, and then he hears of Gilgamesh. He hears of the king's force, his appetite, his pride. He hears enough to understand that in Uruk there is another being shaped by excess, another creature of strength and danger, but one who has taken that strength into walls instead of grasslands. One who rules men as if men were a herd. One who has never been stopped. Enkidu does not admire this. He burns at it. So now the story tightens. On one side of the world stands Gilgamesh, king inside the walls, all pressure and heat, a man who has never yet touched his limit. On the other side stands Enkidu, newly torn from the wild, still carrying the silence of the open land in his body, anger rising in him at the sound of a king who thinks the city exists for his appetite. Neither man understands yet that the other will become the center of his life. For the moment, there is only collision, only the sense that something long prepared is finally moving. Uruk keeps breathing under the sun. Workers stack bricks, priests chant, women carry jars from the water. Dust lifts in the streets, but beneath the ordinary movement of the city, another rhythm has begun, the kind that means two forces are drawing together, and when they meet, nothing afterward will remain in the same shape. Because the man who will one day cross the world in terror of death is not born from grief alone. First, he has to meet the one person who can make him fully alive. At the gate, they meet like weather. There is no ceremony to it, no careful introduction beneath banners, no priest raising a hand for silence, no old man clearing his throat to name destinies. One blocks the other's path, and that is enough. Dust rises around their feet. People stop in the streets and turn. The murmur spreads before anyone fully sees what is happening. The king of Uruk has finally found something that does not move aside. Gilgamesh looks at Enkidu and sees no fear. Enkidu looks at Gilgamesh and sees no restraint. Then they crash together, not like trained fighters, not like polished nobles performing skill for admiration. They collide like two animals who have both lived too long without an equal. Hands lock, shoulders slam, heels gouge trenches in the earth. They strike walls, doorposts, stone thresholds. The gate shudders under the force of them. Men shout and scatter back. Women pull children behind them. Someone cries out to the gods. Someone else laughs in disbelief. because the impossible has finally happened. The king is being matched. This is more than a fight. It is recognition in violent form. For the first time in his life, Gilgamesh is forced to spend himself completely. No quick domination, no easy victory handed to him by rank, awe, or terror. Enkidu answers strength with strength, weight with weight, fury with fury. Every move meets another move. Every surge stops against a body built to refuse. It is not graceful. It is exhausting. It is magnificent. And somewhere in the middle of that struggle, in the heaving breath and the sweat and the astonishment of both men, something stranger than victory appears. Delight. Not soft delight, not joy in any peaceful sense, something sharper. The wild exhilaration of finding at last a boundary that pushes back. Gilgamesh has spent his life overrunning every limit around him. Enkidu is the first limit that feels alive. Enkidu, who came to stop him, feels the same dangerous spark, because it is one thing to hate a tyrant from a distance. It is another to stand in front of him and discover not just arrogance, but magnitude. When they finally break apart, neither is unchanged. In some tellings, one gains the upper hand for a moment. In others, the contest simply burns itself out. But the deeper truth is that the fight is not decided by who falls. It is decided by what they see in one another. Not an enemy, not exactly. A likeness, a mirror made of different clay. The city waits for what comes next. Another charge, a killing blow, royal guards rushing in, some punishment, some command, some proof that power cannot bear embarrassment. Instead, the air shifts. Gilgamesh laughs. It is not a cruel laugh, not the laugh of a man mocking weakness. It is the laugh that escapes a person who has suddenly been delivered from a loneliness so old he no longer knew its name. Enkidu stands before him, chest rising, eyes bright, body still ready to strike. And Gilgamesh, who has always lived above other people, and therefore apart from them, understands something before he can put it into words. This man was not sent merely to stop me. He was sent so I would not remain alone inside my own strength. That is the beginning of their brotherhood. It happens fast, but not cheaply. Some bonds are not built slowly through polite trust. Some are forged in the instant two people realize the other can survive the full force of who they are. Gilgamesh and Enkidu become inseparable not because they are gentlemen, but because each has found in the other the one presence large enough to contain him. And that changes the temperature of the whole story. Until now, Gilgamesh has been a force pressing outward against the world. With Enkidu beside him, he becomes directional, focused. The energy that once oppressed Uruk now seeks distance, trial, danger, fame. Friendship does not make him smaller, it makes him sharper. The city feels the difference at once. The pressure inside the walls eases, not because the king is suddenly humble, but because he now has somewhere else to aim his hunger. This is the part where a simpler tale would congratulate itself. The wild man civilizes the tyrant. The tyrant learns companionship. Balance is restored. The city breathes easier. But the Epic of Gilgamesh is too old and too honest to stop there. It understands a darker truth. When men like these become brothers, peace is rarely the result. Shared strength does not settle. It seeks a stage. Soon, Gilgamesh is speaking of cedar forests, not ordinary woodland, not groves near the fields, where boys cut branches and herds shelter in noon heat. The great Cedar Forest, distant, sacred, forbidden, a place heavy with divine ownership, where the trees rise colossal and straight, where resin scents the air, where shadow pools deep even at midday. It is a place associated not with daily human use, but with awe, danger, and boundary. The kind of place people talk about with lowered voices. The kind of place that exists partly as geography and partly as warning. It has a guardian, Humbaba. Even his name enters the room like smoke. This is no local bandit, no rival king, no beast to be cornered with spears in the reeds. Humbaba belongs to the category of ancient fear, a monstrous keeper set over what men are not supposed to take. His roar is said to be floodwater, his mouth fire, his breath death. Around him hangs an aura not just of physical danger, but of divine prohibition. You do not go to the Cedar Forest because the forest does not belong to you. You do not strike its guardian because some powers are there to remind human beings where the line is. Gilgamesh hears all this and wants to go more. This is where his greatness and his fatal blindness remain fused together. He does not hear warning as warning. He hears it as invitation. Difficulty seduces him. Prohibition attracts him. The very fact that something has been set apart by fear makes him want to carve his name into it. And Enkidu, who once belonged to the outer world, who knows the smell of wilderness more intimately than walls and incense, hesitates. That hesitation matters because Enkidu knows in his body what Gilgamesh only knows in theory. There are places where man is small and should know it. He understands the old shiver that moves through creatures when they approach a domain that is not theirs. He has heard of Humbaba before. He knows the guardian is not just a story told to frighten children. The Cedar Forest is not a testing ground built for heroes. It is a limit. For a brief moment, the story could still turn another way. Gilgamesh could listen. He could accept that there is a difference between courage and trespass. He could remain in Uruk, king of the city, changed enough by friendship to rule better and live longer. The walls would still stand. The people would still work under the sun. Enkidu would still be by his side. There would be wine in the courtyards, drums in the temple precinct, festivals, harvests, years. But then there would be no story, or rather, there would be no wound deep enough to keep this story alive for thousands of years. So Gilgamesh speaks the language of men who refuse caution. He speaks of fame, of deeds that outlast flesh, of making a name that will not rot when the body rots. It is a revealing impulse, especially when you know what waits ahead. Even here, long before Enkidu dies, before the plant is lost, before the road to the edge of the world opens beneath his feet, Gilgamesh is already circling the same hunger. If the body cannot be trusted to endure, perhaps the name can. If a man cannot escape death, perhaps he can grow so bright in life that memory cannot quite extinguish him. This is one of the oldest ambitions in literature, and it enters the story before the hero himself fully understands it. Enkidu listens, warns, then slowly he bends. Not because the danger disappears, not because the logic improves, because brotherhood has its own gravity. Two men who have discovered themselves in one another do not easily agree to remain ordinary. Gilgamesh's will is intense. Enkidu's loyalty is becoming stronger than his fear. And somewhere beneath fear there is another feeling too, one he may barely admit, the desire to see whether even Humbaba can stand against them. So they prepare. Weapons are made heavy and fine, axes balanced, swords sharpened, men in workshops hammer metal while sparks jump into dim air. The sound of labor rings through Uruk. Outside, the fields keep moving through their normal cycle, but inside the city, another kind of harvest is being gathered. Intention, danger, resolve. Elders hear what the king is planning and advise caution. They are old enough to know that glory has buried as many men as cowardice ever did. They tell him the road is long, the guardian terrible, the enterprise foolish. Gilgamesh hears them the way he hears all lesser limits. He thanks them, perhaps, or perhaps he merely smiles. But inside, he has already gone. And Enkidu, once wild among gazelles, now walks beside the king toward a forest he fears more deeply than the king can yet imagine. That is another reason this story feels so human. The worst decisions are rarely made in ignorance alone. Often, someone knows. Someone sees the shadow clearly. Someone names the danger in plain words. But the movement toward disaster continues anyway, powered by pride, affection, momentum, and the terrible sweetness of believing that this time, because it is you, the old laws might make an exception. They leave Uruk. Behind them, the walls glow in the sun, immense and geometric, the labor of many hands hardened into permanence. Ahead lies distance, dust, night fires, the long walking rhythm that strips city life from the body one day at a time. As they go, the noise of civilization thins. Human voices become occasional. The earth broadens. Open land reasserts itself. Wind has more room to move. There are dreams on the journey. That too matters. Ancient stories often place dreams at the threshold of danger, as if the sleeping mind can smell what daylight pride refuses to acknowledge. Gilgamesh dreams and wakes. Troubled, Enkidu interprets. Sometimes he turns the images toward hope, perhaps to steady them both. But the very presence of these dreams tells you the deeper current has already changed. This is no longer just an expedition for timber or glory. Something larger has begun to gather around them, something that will not end in the Cedar Forest. Still they continue. At last, the trees rise, not all at once, but enough to alter the light, enough for air to cool and resin to thicken the breath, enough for the world to feel vertical in a new way, trunks lifting like pillars into shadow. It is beautiful in the severe way forbidden things often are. Too orderly to be wild in the ordinary sense. Too old to feel welcoming. This is not the generous green of cultivated orchards. This is depth, height, silence under pressure. And somewhere inside, it waits Humbaba. The guardian is not merely large. He feels imposed, as though dread itself has put on a body. Ancient descriptions gather around him like storm clouds. Monstrous face, terrifying voice, radiance of fear. Later readers have tried to pin him down, to picture him exactly, but perhaps the text is wiser than that. Some beings should remain partly unseeable. What matters is not his anatomy. What matters is the effect. He makes the forest feel defended by more than wood and distance. He makes trespass feel visible. When Humbaba confronts them, the old question sharpens. What are men doing here? Even Gilgamesh feels it now, at least for a heartbeat. The difference between wanting a boundary broken and standing before the power that enforces it. There is no city behind him, no audience, no easy path back to the known world. Only trees, breath, weapon weight, brother beside him, terror ahead. This is the moment many lives are decided by, not when the boast is spoken, when the thing boasted against finally appears. Gilgamesh wavers. Enkidu does not let him stay in that wavering for long. Whether out of courage, loyalty, or the knowledge that hesitation will kill them faster than any monster, he drives them forward. Together they attack. The battle is brutal, confused, full of noise and pressure. Blades strike. Shouts break under the trees. The forest that was supposed to remain untouched now rings with violence. Humbaba is powerful, but there are two of them, and they are at the height of themselves. Brotherhood turned into force. In some versions, divine aid leans toward them. In all versions, the result is the same. They overcome him. And here, the epic reveals another of its deepest instincts. Victory does not erase the crime of crossing the line. Because Humbaba, defeated, does something dangerous to the conscience. He speaks, he pleads, he bargains for life. The monstrous guardian becomes, for a moment, pitiful, vulnerable, a being who can fear death as men do. The clean shape of heroic triumph blurs. To kill an enemy in the rush of combat is one thing. To kill a fallen enemy who asks to live is another. Gilgamesh hesitates again. Enkidu urges the final blow. They kill Humbaba. The Cedar Forest is opened. The sacred trees are cut. They take what they came for: timber, triumph, fame. And also something else, though they do not yet know its full weight. They take consequence. The return from the forest should feel victorious, and on the surface it does. They have done what men were not supposed to do. The king of Uruk and his wild-born brother have entered the forbidden place, destroyed its guardian, and come back alive. Songs would be enough for most men after that. A name would be enough. But some lives become more dangerous with every success, because success teaches exactly the wrong lesson. Keep going. Press harder. The world yields. Gilgamesh begins to shine with that dangerous lesson now, and the gods are not finished watching him. Victory makes men reckless and gods impatient. When Gilgamesh returns from the Cedar Forest, he carries more than cedar and fame. He carries the bright, dangerous certainty that he and Enkidu can survive anything. They have gone where men were warned not to go, killed what was set there to stop them, and come home under the sun instead of under the earth. Uruk sees them and marvels. The walls hold their names like an echo. The city that once groaned under Gilgamesh now has reason to stare in awe, and awe is its own intoxicant. He washes, he dresses, oil shines on his skin. Royal cloth falls clean over the body that fought beneath the cedars. He is everything a king is supposed to be in the eyes of the city. Strong, radiant, terrible, alive. It is then that Ishtar sees him and desires him. The goddess does not speak, timidly. She offers him what mortals are supposed to crave: her favor, her bed, her elevation above ordinary men. To be chosen by a goddess is no small thing. In older worlds, it can mean abundance, power, legitimacy, a name magnified beyond death. Another man might have bowed at once. Gilgamesh does not bow. He answers with memory, which is sometimes more dangerous than defiance. He names the fates of those Ishtar once loved. One by one he recalls them, broken, diminished, discarded, turned into mourning after being chosen. His refusal is not gentle. It is precise, humiliating. He speaks to a goddess as though she were merely another appetite he has no intention of feeding. That is the kind of insult that does not vanish into air. Ishtar goes to her father in fury and demands the bull of heaven. This is another of those moments where the story tightens with terrifying efficiency. There is no long wandering away from consequence, no soft delay. One insult rises, one divine rage answers, and from above the ordered world of men comes something vast enough to turn fields into wounds. When the bull descends, it does not simply attack, it ruins. The earth splits beneath its force, cracks open, men fall into them. Dust and panic tear through the city. It is not a beast in the ordinary sense. It is punishment with horns. Sky-made violence, a reminder that men may cut sacred trees and boast of their strength, but the powers above them still know how to answer. Gilgamesh does not run. Neither does Enkidu. That is what makes the next moment so important. It would be easy to imagine this as merely another monster fight, another proof that the two of them together are unstoppable. But the deeper current is darker. Every victory they win now draws the cord tighter. Every line crossed makes the next one easier. They have stopped thinking in terms of whether something should be done. They think only in terms of whether it can be done. The bull charges. The city shakes. Men scream and scatter. Gilgamesh and Enkidu move toward it. They fight as brothers who have already survived the impossible once, and now believe that impossibility has become their natural element. Enkidu seizes. Gilgamesh strikes. Strength meets force with force. Dust rises. Blood falls. At last, the bull of heaven crashes down, and with it something else crashes too, though no one in the heat of triumph fully hears it yet. A balance has been broken. Enkidu, hot with victory, goes too far. He mocks Ishtar. He throws part of the bull toward her in contempt. It is a savage, unforgettable gesture, and in human terms, it feels earned. But myth is not interested in human fairness. Myth keeps score by another system. A forest guardian dead, a heavenly beast slain, a goddess shamed. Even in triumph, doom is already selecting its path. The gods confer, and they do not ask whether Gilgamesh and Enkidu are brave. They already know that. They ask which one must pay. This is one of the coldest turns in the whole epic. Not because death comes unexpectedly. Death is always circling old stories, but because it arrives by judgment after glory. Enkidu does not fall in battle. He is sentenced. He dreams first. In the dream, there is dread before there is pain. He sees the divine decision moving toward him. He feels the weight of it before he can name it. Then waking comes, and with it, sickness. Not a clean wound, not a warrior's end beneath open sky. Illness, weakness, a body turning against itself, while the mind remains trapped inside it. For a man like Enkidu, who once ran with gazelles and broke traps with his bare hands, this is a cruelty almost worse than sudden death. It is not just dying, it is being forced to watch strength leak away. At first, there is anger. He curses the trapper who found him, curses the woman who led him from the wild into the world of men, curses the bread, the beer, the city, the very threshold of civilization that took him from the beasts and brought him into the chain of consequence. In pain, the mind reaches backward. It imagines another road. If I had never crossed that line, perhaps I would still be free beneath the open sky. Perhaps the wolves would still run beside me. Perhaps the gods would not know my name. But another voice answers him, a softer truth. If he had stayed wild, he would never have known friendship, never have shared bread, battle, laughter, purpose, never have looked into the face of another man and recognized a brother. The curse of civilization is pain, yes, but also memory, meaning, love. And that makes the loss heavier, not lighter. So Enkidu weakens. Day by day, the body that once seemed made of earth and animal force becomes a place of suffering. He speaks, rages, remembers. At times, he sees ahead into the dark house where the dead go, and what he sees is not comforting. Dust, shadows, kings and priests alike stripped of distinction. A place where crowns no longer matter, and strong arms no longer lift anything. This is vital because the Epic of Gilgamesh does not soften death into noble light. The underworld here is not reward. It is diminishment, continuation, without glory, existence thinned down to a gray persistence. And Gilgamesh watches. That is where the real fracture begins. Until now, he has seen danger from the outside. A guardian, a beast, a forest, a journey, an enemy you can strike. Enkidu's illness teaches him a more terrible lesson. Death does not always come roaring. Sometimes it enters the room quietly and sits by the bed. Sometimes it takes the strongest body he knows and hollows it from within, while no weapon can touch it. He cannot fight this. He can stand beside the bed. He can speak. He can grieve before grief is even complete. But he cannot seize death by the throat and throw it to the ground the way he threw Enkidu at the gate, the way together they brought down Humbaba and the bull. For the first time in the story, force becomes useless in his hands. Then Enkidu dies. There are deaths that belong to legend, and deaths that belong to the body. This one belongs to the body. The breath stops. The warmth begins to leave. The friend who had answered blow for blow, step for step, laugh for laugh, no longer answers anything. And Gilgamesh does not at once accept what he sees. He touches him, stays beside him, waits too long, as grieving people always do, for movement that will not return. The epic understands this moment with frightening intimacy. Gilgamesh does not simply mourn, he resists the fact itself. He stays with the body until decay makes denial impossible. That detail matters. It means he is not grieving in the abstract. He is studying the process he fears most. He is learning, with his own eyes, what happens to flesh after the soul is gone. That is when terror enters him completely. Not sorrow alone, terror, because Enkidu was not just beloved. He was proof of strength, proof that there existed in the world another being so alive, so forceful, so hard to imagine broken, that if even he could become still, then no strength means safety, no victory means protection, no fame means exemption. This is the true birth of the quest. Gilgamesh cries out that he fears death, and for the first time the mighty king speaks not as ruler, not as conqueror, not even as hero, but as a man who has seen the end too closely and cannot bear that it is coming for him too. The old confidence burns away almost at once. He tears himself from the city, leaves behind the walls he built, the people who know his name, the order of Uruk. He puts on skins. He goes into the wild like one trying to outrun a verdict. This is why the story remains so modern. It does not pretend that wisdom appears the instant grief strikes. Gilgamesh does not become serene. He becomes desperate. He has heard of one being who escaped the common fate, one man beyond ordinary men. Ut-napishtim, survivor of the great flood, the one to whom everlasting life was granted. And now Gilgamesh fixes on that one impossible exception with the full force of a drowning mind. If there is even one breach in the wall, then perhaps the wall can be crossed. If one man was spared, perhaps another may yet learn how. That hope is enough to drag him beyond reason. He wanders in, skins across waste and distance, no longer looking like a king, but like someone already half exiled from the human world. The land grows harsher, the road stops being a road. He comes at last to the twin peaks of Mashu, where the sun itself is said to pass. And there the old story gives him another threshold. Guardians, not fully human, beings of terror, scorpion-bodied watchers, whose very presence can stun ordinary men. They see him and are astonished that a mortal has come this far. That astonishment is one of the story's best hooks because it tells you how unnatural his journey has become. Even the keepers of the cosmic gate look at him as though he has already exceeded his place. They ask who he is, what drives him, what kind of grief can push flesh this far into forbidden distance. He tells them, not in polished royal speech now, but in the raw language of loss and fear. My friend died. I saw what death does. I will not accept the same end. There is something naked in that confession. Greatness is still there, but stripped of all ornament. He is no longer hiding behind fame. He wants only one thing. The guardians let him pass. Beyond them lies the tunnel of darkness. This is not ordinary night, not the darkness of a city lane after moonset, not a grove at dusk, not clouded weather. It is a darkness so complete it seems to erase the world itself. Gilgamesh enters and walks through blackness for hour after hour, with no light, no horizon, no proof that anything lies ahead, but more dark, the kind of passage that can make a man doubt not just his path, but his own existence. A lesser traveler would turn back or go mad. He keeps going. That matters because the story is tightening toward its deepest form now. The man who once sought fame in Cedar Forests is becoming something stranger, a human being pushing through zones that feel built to reject the human body. And the farther he goes, the more one question grows beneath every step. What happens if he actually reaches the answer? When he emerges from the darkness, the world is wrong in a new way. There is light again, but it does not feel like the light of ordinary men. Before him lies a garden where precious stones hang like fruit, where branches glitter, where beauty seems less grown than arranged by some older intelligence. After so much blackness, it feels almost unreal, as if he has stepped not into safety, but into the dream of a world that does not belong to him. And still he keeps moving, because by now, beauty itself has lost the power to stop him. He did not come for wonder. He came for an answer. That answer still lies farther on. He reaches the edge of the cosmic sea and finds Siduri, the alewife, wise and watchful, a figure of threshold and human measure. She sees him coming in his skins, wild-haired, exhausted, half-king and half-hunted creature, and at first she fears him. He looks less like a ruler than like grief given a body. When he speaks, the whole shape of his suffering spills out at once. Enkidu is dead. Death is real. I have seen what waits for flesh, and I am searching for the one man who escaped. Siduri hears him, and then she says something that has echoed through human history ever since. The life you seek, you will not find. It is one of the most important moments in the epic because the story briefly pauses and offers another path, not a secret, not a ritual, not a map to eternity, a philosophy. Eat your bread with joy. Wash, dress, love the child who holds your hand. Delight in the wife at your side. Accept the mortal portion and live it fully. It is, in its way, one of the oldest statements of human wisdom. You cannot defeat death, so fill your days before it comes. But Gilgamesh cannot hear that, not yet. For a man in ordinary sorrow, Siduri's words might be comfort. For Gilgamesh, they are unbearable. He has not come this far to be told to go home and enjoy his meals. He does not want acceptance. He wants escape, and that refusal keeps the story alive. If he accepted wisdom here, the tale would become gentler, smaller, truer perhaps, but it would lose the wound at its center. Gilgamesh is not ready for wisdom that asks surrender. He still needs the harder answer. So Siduri points him onward to Urshanabi, the ferryman. Even that crossing is guarded by difficulty. Nothing comes cleanly in this story. The waters of death lie ahead, deadly not because they rage, but because contact itself means ruin. The crossing must be managed with care, with poles, distance, precision. By now, the journey has become less like an adventure than an initiation through layers of impossibility. Forest, bull, sickness, mountain gate, darkness, and now waters that living flesh was never meant to cross. Gilgamesh reaches Urshanabi in agitation and force, still carrying the old habit of action before thought. In some versions, he smashes the strange stone things associated with the crossing, and only afterward must solve the problem he has worsened with his own impatience. That detail fits him perfectly. Even at the edge of transcendence, he is still himself, grieving, driven, powerful, and often clumsy in his urgency. He wants the answer so badly that he keeps damaging the road to it. But he gets across, pole after pole, stroke after stroke. He moves over the lethal water toward the one human being whose existence has made this entire madness seem possible. By now, the suspense is at its highest point. If Utnapishtim is real, then death is not absolute. If death is not absolute, then maybe grief has not told the whole truth. Maybe the wall is real, but has a door. Maybe one man can show another how to open it. Then at last he arrives. Utnapishtim does not look like what longing imagines. There is no blazing aura around him, no impossible youth bursting from his skin, no visible sign that eternity has transformed him into something dazzling. And that is part of the shock. Gilgamesh has crossed the limits of the world to find the exception to death, and the exception appears almost ordinary. It is an old lesson in stories and in life. What we pursue with absolute hunger rarely looks grand when finally seen up close. Gilgamesh stares and asks the only question that matters. How? How are you here? How did you obtain what all others lose? And Utnapishtim answers with the flood. The tale opens beneath the larger tale, like a dark chamber inside a tomb. Once, the gods decided to drown the world. The reasons shift in retellings: human noise, divine irritation, the old instability of the bond between heaven and earth. But the result is clear: destruction on a total scale. Then one god, speaking through walls and secrecy, warned Utnapishtim: build the boat, seal it, bring in life, prepare for water to erase the known world. This is where the epic expands beyond one man's grief into something older and stranger. Gilgamesh came seeking a method, a path, a repeatable answer. What he hears instead is catastrophe. Utnapishtim did not outwit death by discipline or valor. He survived because the cosmos broke, and in the breaking, he was singled out. The flood came. The world was covered. Human beings perished. Even the gods quailed before what they had unleashed. And after the waters fell, after the birds were sent, after sacrifice smoke rose again into the air, Utnapishtim and his wife were granted everlasting life. Granted. That word changes everything. Not won, not earned in the ordinary heroic sense, not taken. Granted. Given as an exception after an event that cannot be recreated by will. It is devastating news for Gilgamesh, because it means the one proof of immortality he has followed to the edge of existence may not be a key at all. It may be a miracle that opens no second time, and still, he does not stop. That is one of the reasons he remains such a powerful figure. Lesser men would collapse here. He has already lost his friend, his peace, his kingly dignity, the simple shape of ordinary life. Now even the one surviving witness to immortality tells a story that offers no method. Yet Gilgamesh still leans forward, still waits, still hopes there must be something more. There is one more test. Utnapishtim tells him, if you seek to overcome death, begin with something smaller. Stay awake. The challenge sounds almost insulting. After mountains, monsters, waters, and darkness, the final gate is not a dragon or a divine trial of steel. It is wakefulness. But that is exactly why it is brilliant. Sleep is the small brother of death, the daily surrender no human can permanently resist. Every night, consciousness loosens its grip. Every night, the body rehearses disappearance and returns only because morning permits it. If Gilgamesh cannot master sleep, what right has he to ask for mastery over death? He sits down to prove himself, and sleep takes him almost at once. It is one of the most humiliating and profound moments in the epic, not because he is weak, but because he is human. He has exhausted himself across half the structure of myth: grief, travel, terror, hunger, heat, cold, longing. All of it is in him. The body claims its due. He sinks. While he sleeps, Utnapishtim's wife bakes loaves of bread and sets them out one by one so the passing days can be counted when he wakes. It is a merciless little clock made of ordinary things. Not stars, not omens, bread going stale. When Gilgamesh wakes, he tries to deny what happened. He thinks it was brief. He thinks he only drifted. But the loaves are there, each in its stage of age and decay, quietly proving what the body did while the mind was absent. This is the second great crushing of his hope. The first was Enkidu's death, which taught him that strength cannot prevent mortality. The second is this, which teaches him that even before death, the human creature is made of surrender. No one stays fully awake forever. No one remains fully sovereign over himself. We are interrupted daily by a force we do not command. To want immortality while being unable to defeat sleep is almost absurd. And yet, the epic, cruel, and compassionate at once still does not end there. Because Utnapishtim, moved perhaps by pity, perhaps by the sheer extremity of what Gilgamesh has endured, reveals one final thing. There is a plant. It grows in the deep, thorned, difficult, hidden. It is not immortality exactly, but renewal. A return of youth, a loosening of age's grip. Not victory over death, but a postponement, a recovery, a chance. Hope rushes back into the story with almost dangerous force. That is what makes the next movement so effective. Just when the tale seems to have closed every door, another one opens. Gilgamesh dives. He binds stones to his feet, goes down into the dark waters, and tears the plant from the deep. It cuts him, but he does not care. He has it. After everything, after the sickness, the road, the darkness, the sleep, the humiliation, he has something real in his hands. You can feel the pulse of the story change here. It is no longer pure despair. It becomes possibility again. Gilgamesh does not even mean to consume it selfishly at once. In many retellings, he plans to bring it back to Uruk, to test it, to share it, to let the old men of the city taste renewal before he himself takes it. That detail matters. The king who began the story using others has changed. Grief has widened him. The quest that began in terror now carries, however faintly, the shape of return. He is thinking again of the city, of people, of bringing back more than glory. And that is precisely when the story prepares its cruelest stroke. On the journey back, he stops by a pond to bathe. It sounds so harmless, so human. No trumpet of doom, no thunder from the gods, no warning voice from heaven. Just a man who has traveled too far, carrying too much, lowering himself into cool water for one brief moment of relief. The plant is set aside. A snake smells its sweetness. The creature slips from the crack in the earth or the edge of the reeds, silent as time itself. It takes the plant and glides away. And as it goes, it sheds its skin. That image is unbearable in its precision. The renewal Gilgamesh wanted becomes visible immediately, but not for him. The snake takes the gift. The snake leaves behind the sign of transformation. Nature performs in front of the hero the very act of renewal he cannot claim. No battle can be fought, no enemy can be slain. He is not defeated by force, but by a moment, by tiredness, by pause, by being a body that must stop. This is why the opening scene hits so hard, because all the great dangers of the epic now gather into one unbearable simplicity. He survived the impossible and lost to the ordinary. He reached farther than any man and was undone by rest. And suddenly, the whole story becomes clear. The Cedar Forest, the bull, Enkidu, the grief, the road, the darkness, the ferryman, the flood, the bread, the deep water plant, all of it leads here to the oldest realization many humans ever heard spoken aloud in story form, that death is not only stronger than strength, it is woven into the fabric of being human so intimately that even our pauses betray us. Gilgamesh weeps, not with the blind panic that drove him from Uruk, but with the exhausted knowledge of someone who has reached the outer edge of refusal and found nothing there that he could keep. This is not the grief of first loss. It is the grief that comes after every argument has failed, after every road has been walked, after hope itself has been tested and dropped from his hands. So he returns. By now, the return matters more than the quest, because the man coming back is not the man who left. He approaches Uruk again, the city of walls, brick, order, labor, memory. The same walls he once embodied as pure pride now appear differently. They are still great, Still human defiance made visible, but now he sees what they really are. Not protection from death, not victory over time. An answer of another kind. Look at the walls, he says. It is one of the most moving turns in ancient literature. After chasing literal escape from mortality, Gilgamesh points not to heaven, nor to hidden herbs, nor to cosmic secret knowledge, but to the work of human hands. The walls, the city, the baked brick, the thing people build together, knowing they will die. This is not a cheerful moral. It is harsher than that. It says, you will not keep your body. You may not even keep your youth. But you can build. You can order chaos for a while. You can leave form behind. You can place your name into labor, memory, inscription, story. And perhaps that is the only immortality humans were ever truly offered. Not endless life, but endurance through trace. This is why Gilgamesh does not feel ancient in the dead sense. He feels ancient in the terrible living sense. His fear is our fear. His refusal is our refusal. His journey is the giant mythic version of something ordinary people still do every day. We lose someone, glimpse our own end inside that loss, and begin bargaining with reality through work, through children, through art, through prayer, through health, through ambition, through memory, through hope that somehow our case will be different. Usually it is not, and yet we go on. That is the final greatness of the story. It does not give us immortality. It gives us recognition. It says that human beings understood this wound very early enough to press it into clay, early enough to imagine a king who went farther than all others, only so he could return, carrying the same truth every grieving person learns, sooner or later. No one gets to keep the body forever, but the voice can remain. The name can remain. The story can remain. Gilgamesh could not hold the plant. He could not defeat sleep. He could not follow Enkidu out of the reach of decay. He could not turn divine blood into divine exemption. He failed in the most complete way possible, not at the beginning, but at the edge of success. And still, 4,500 years later, we speak his name. That may be the deepest irony of all. The man who could not win immortality became immortal in the one way he never set out to seek at first. Not through flesh, not through magic, through remembrance, through the endurance of a story carved into clay by hands long vanished. So, when the snake slips away into the water, it is not only stealing a plant, it is closing one door and opening another. The door to the hardest human knowledge, that the body ends, that youth goes, that love does not save us from burial, that even kings wake with empty hands, and yet the walls still rise, the tablets still speak, the old grief still travels, the name still lives. Gilgamesh almost conquered death. Instead, he taught humanity how it feels to lose to it, and why we keep building anyway. There is one more reason this story has never gone quiet. It is not only about death, it is about the insult of death. Not the fact that we end, but the fact that we end while still wanting, while still building, while still loving, while still making plans for next season, next harvest, next child, next wall, next journey. A beast dies because it dies, but a human being dies in the middle of meaning, and that is why Gilgamesh cannot simply be read as an ancient king with exaggerated adventures. He feels like the first fully visible human being in literature, because he does not merely suffer loss. He rebels against the structure of existence itself. That rebellion is what makes him modern. A lesser story would have punished him and stopped there. Proud king, defiant hero, he reached too far. He was humbled. Learn your lesson, but this epic is wiser and crueler than that. It knows that his refusal is not foolish in some trivial way. It is the most natural thing in the world. Of course he rebels. Of course he cannot accept it. Of course he tries to break the oldest law. Any creature that can imagine forever will eventually rage at being denied it. And yet, the epic is just as clear about the answer. The answer is no. No, the body will not be kept. No, love will not buy exemption. No, courage will not move the boundary. No, grief will not open a hidden gate. No, even the one living exception will not be a pattern you can follow. That is what gives the story its unusual weight. It does not tease immortality and then reveal a ritual. It does not flatter the listener with secret knowledge. It does not whisper that the special, the strong, the chosen can slip through. It goes all the way to the edge of that fantasy and then closes its hand. The plant is gone. The friend is gone. Youth is finished. What remains? At first, that sounds like despair. But the epic does not end in despair. It ends in a limitation seen clearly. And there is a strange dignity in that. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk not healed, not comforted, not made innocent by suffering. He returns knowing more than he wanted to know. He knows what a body becomes. He knows what even great strength cannot prevent. He knows that the world contains mysteries, but not all mysteries are gifts for man. He knows that some truths are not there to rescue us. They are there to strip away illusion. That kind of knowledge can destroy a person or deepen him. In Gilgamesh, it does both. He loses the fantasy that he can live forever in flesh, but in losing it, he becomes capable of seeing human life for what it actually is. Fragile, yes. Brief, yes. Exposed to sickness, accident, age, grief, yes. But also capable of making forms that outlast the pulse that made them. A city, a wall, a friendship, a name, a story. This is why the wall matters so much at the end. To a modern eye, it may seem too small an answer. A man seeks eternity and gets architecture. A hero loses the plant of renewal and points at brickwork. But that is only disappointing if you think the story is downgrading itself. It is not. It is clarifying itself. The wall is not a consolation prize. It is the human answer to vanishing, not victory over death, but resistance to erasure. We were here. We made this. We suffered. We loved. We feared. We built. In that sense, Uruk itself becomes the true counterweight to mortality. Not because cities live forever, they do not, but because they extend the human hand beyond the single lifespan. One generation bakes the brick, another repairs it, another inherits the gate, the canal, the shrine. The story, death takes individuals, but labor accumulates, meaning accumulates. Civilization is, among other things, a long argument against disappearance. And perhaps that is why this tale had to be set in one of the world's first great cities. Gilgamesh is not some nameless wanderer in a timeless forest. He is king of Uruk. He belongs to walls, records, labor, kingship, inheritance, law, He belongs to the moment when human beings were first learning how to anchor themselves against oblivion, not just with children and graves, but with writing, masonry, order, urban memory. The epic is ancient enough to stand near the dawn of that experiment. It almost feels as if the species itself is speaking through him, asking its first unbearable question in durable form. If we can build cities, why can't we build a way out of death? The answer, again, is no. But the asking changes everything. Because once the question has been asked this clearly, human beings are never the same. We become creatures who know the limit and go on anyway. Creatures who can look directly at burial and still make laws, songs, temples, gardens, tools, poems, promises. Creatures absurd enough to love even though love guarantees grief. Ambitious enough to build even though wind and time will take their share. Hopeful enough to have children even though every child enters a mortal world. Gilgamesh becomes great not because he accepts this easily, but because he drags the refusal all the way to its end. He does what most people only do in fragments. He follows denial farther than most minds can bear. He tries force, distance, secret knowledge, exceptions, divine survivors, hidden plants. He runs every path. He exhausts the fantasy completely. And because he exhausts it, his return carries authority. When a man who has gone that far comes back empty-handed and points to the walls, it means more than if a wise elder had said it at the start. It means the answer has been tested. That is why the ending feels heavy instead of sentimental. Gilgamesh has earned the right to speak of human works because he has already tried to escape being human and failed. There is also something bitterly beautiful in the fact that the snake does not speak. No speech, no divine explanation, no villain's satisfaction. It simply takes the plant and leaves its skin behind. The universe does not always defeat us dramatically. Sometimes it does so with total indifference. That may be one of the hardest truths in the whole epic. Not that we lose, but that reality often does not pause to explain the loss. It just continues. Water closes. Heat remains. The world goes on. And still Gilgamesh goes on too. That may be the most human act in the story. Not the journey out. Not the battle with Humbaba. Not the crossing of the waters of death. The return. The willingness to go back into the city after the answer has failed you. To wake, empty-handed, and still walk home. Most of life is there, in that motion. Not in the fantasy of final victory, but in the carrying of knowledge, in the ability to continue after the door closes, in the building of walls, meals, families, customs, rituals, stories. After we have understood that none of them abolish death, human life is not meaningful because it escapes the end. It is meaningful because it creates under the sign of the end. That is the great dark gift of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It strips us of childish hope without stripping us of value. You will die, it says. Your beloved will die. Your strength will fail. Your body will not keep its bargain with you. No road goes around this. But look, there is still bread. There is still stone. There is still a hand in yours for a little while. There is still work worth doing before sunset. There is still a name that may travel farther than the breath that forms it. There is still a wall to raise against chaos, even if chaos one day takes the wall. That is not small. It is almost everything. Perhaps that is why this ancient king, who began as a man too large for others and too proud for limits, ends as something rarer, a witness. He has seen the strongest friend he knew become a body. He has seen the cosmic exception and learned it was not repeatable. He has held renewal in his hands and watched it vanish. He has walked to the edge of the human map and found no rescue waiting there. So he returns with the heaviest knowledge of all, that mortality is not a mistake in the design, it is the design. And once you know that, the question changes. No longer, how do I live forever? But what do I make while I am here? What do I leave in the clay? What do I raise before my hands are still? Who do I love knowing love cannot protect either of us from time? What shape can I give my brief existence that will outlast my brief existence? Gilgamesh does not answer those questions with philosophy alone. He answers them by remaining, by turning back toward Uruk, by looking at what human beings have made, by entering memory instead of escaping nature. And so the oldest hero in literature fails in the most important quest he can imagine. He cannot keep youth. He cannot recover his friend. He cannot pass beyond the common grave. He cannot become deathless. But his failure becomes revelation. His limit becomes instruction. His grief becomes language. His loss becomes one of the first mirrors in which humanity ever saw itself clearly. That is why his name survived the mud brick palaces, the dynasties, the priests, the workshops, the harvest dust, the kings who came after him and thought themselves permanent. That is why broken tablets still speak. That is why this old story still feels warm with breath, when so many younger stories have gone cold, because nothing in it has ceased to be true. We are still Gilgamesh by the pond, still waking in panic, still searching the reeds with empty hands, still stunned that the thing can be gone after coming so close, still asking whether there must be some other road, still building walls when the answer is no. And that may be the final, quiet triumph hidden inside the defeat. Death takes the body, time takes the city, sand takes the road, water takes the plant. But as long as the story remains, the human refusal remains with it. Not refusal in the childish sense, not the fantasy that we can win. Refusal in the deeper sense that knowing the limit, we still build, still love, still name, still remember. Gilgamesh almost conquered death. Instead, he discovered the harder task, to live under its shadow without surrendering the will to make something. And perhaps that is why, after all these thousands of years, he has not vanished. He lost the plant, he lost the battle he wanted most. He lost everything he crossed the world to save. But he kept the one thing that still reaches us now, the shape of a human being standing at the edge of the impossible, learning at last that he cannot keep forever, and choosing, despite that, to return to the city and build. And so, the oldest hero does not return with eternal life in his hands. He returns with something darker and perhaps more enduring, the knowledge that death cannot be defeated by strength, distance, courage, or desire. He came closer than anyone. He walked farther than anyone. He held the answer for one brief, impossible moment, and still it was taken from him. That is why Gilgamesh never disappeared into the dust like so many other kings. Not because he conquered death, but because he failed before it in the most human way imaginable, with empty hands, a broken heart, and the unbearable knowledge of how close he came. His story survived because it understood us too early. It knew that human beings would go on building, loving, mourning, and reaching beyond themselves. Even after learning that no one keeps the body forever, the plant was lost, Enkidu was lost, but the story remained. And maybe that is the final answer buried in the clay. Gilgamesh did not become immortal by escaping death. He became immortal by giving death a face, a journey, a grief, and a name that the centuries could not quite erase. Somewhere in the silence after the snake slipped back into the water, the first great human truth was spoken. You will not live forever, but if you are remembered, if you are mourned, if you leave something standing after your hands are gone, then not all of you goes down into the dark at once. And that is why, after all these thousands of years, Gilgamesh still stands on the shore, not as the man who won, but as the man who almost did, and taught the rest of us what that loss would feel like.